In this example, I will demonstrate how to easily disable or enable groups of points on the PFC 6000 series fire alarm control panels. There are really two options when disabling points. In the software, you can create zones and assign points to those zones, and then via the fire alarm control panel keypad, you can access the zone to disable all the points assigned to the zone, either the inputs or the outputs or both. Your other option is to monitor, for example, a key switch with an MCM, SCM, or DCM contact input module. You program the contact input as either contact input disable inputs, contact input disable outputs, or contact input disable inputs and outputs. You assign that device, the MCM, SCM, or DCM, to a zone in the programming software. In the same zone, you assign the points that you would like to disable when that key switch is turned. For example, let's say you have a theater that you'd like to disable the smoke detectors. Create a zone in the software. In that particular zone, assign all of the smoke detectors in the theater area. In that same zone, assign the contact input module that you have programmed as disable inputs. When that key switch is turned, it will disable all of the inputs in that particular zone, which in this case is all the smoke detectors that are designated as in the theater area of this particular project. We will start by looking at how this is programmed in the programming software. In this particular example, I am using a PFC 6800. I have already uploaded the program from the Fire panel, and I have given custom names and changed the function of my contact input modules for my particular project. I have also already set up several zones for my particular project, starting with general alarm, which has all of my inputs that need to cause a general alarm in the building, a supervisory zone with my sprinkler supervisory points, a fire drill zone with all of the outputs that I would like to activate during a fire drill. I have 4 zones for elevator recall with their smoke detectors and their relays, as well as 3 zones for air handler shutdown, activated by duct detectors and then relays that will shut the air handlers down. For this particular project, I would like to create a zone that when a key switch is turned, the inputs in the theater area, which is the smoke detectors, will be disabled. So I'm going to create a software zone for that. And I'm just going to label this theater disable. And when this particular key switch is turned, I would like to disable the smoke detectors in that particular area. So I'm going to go over to my points list and I'm going to sort by function. I'm going to find the smoke detectors in the theater area, which are right here, and I'm going to drag them into this zone. So these smoke detectors are all installed in the theater area of this building, and the owner would like to be able to disable them using a key switch in the event that they are using, say, a fog machine or something that creates theatrical smoke in the area. So in the same zone, in order to allow him to do this via a key switch, I have a key switch installed that I am monitoring with an SCM4 module, and I have labeled that module disable inputs and outputs. And that is right here. It's a contact input module, so I drag that into that zone as well. In this case, there are only inputs in this zone, so when this owner activates the key switch, it will disable the inputs and the outputs, which don't exist. When these devices are disabled, when the key switch is turned, they will go into trouble at the fire alarm control panel. So that's all that has to be done in order to create a disable zone for my inputs for this theater area. I'm going to do another one for my air handlers. I would like to be able to disable the air handler shutdown when servicing the fire alarm control panel. So I'm going to call this AHU disable. And in this case, I just want to disable the outputs. So I have another SCM4 module that is monitoring a key switch, and I've labeled that contact input disable outputs, because all I want to do when this key switch is turned is disable the relays that are shutting down the air handlers. So now I need to find those relays, which are an RLY5 device. They're these 3 relays, and I'm going to assign them to that zone as well. So now when this key switch is turned, it's going to disable all of the outputs assigned to this zone, and in this case it is 3 relays that are shutting down the air handlers. Again, these relays will go into trouble at the fire alarm control panel when they are disabled. I'm also going to create a zone in the event that I'd like to disable the inputs that activate elevator recall. So I'm going to call this elevator recall disable. And again, I have a key switch that I have monitored by an STM4 module that I have programmed as contact input disable inputs. So when this key switch is turned, it will disable all the inputs assigned to this zone. So then I can go to my photo detectors and find all of the elevator recall devices. So I have smoke detectors in the lobbies and the machine room. I also can install the heat detector in here. Those are all the inputs for my elevator recall. When this key switch is turned, it will disable all of these inputs affecting the elevator recall. I could also make this a disable inputs and outputs and put the relays in here, which would disable all of the points of elevator recall. Now this is using a contact input device or an MCM, SCM, or DCM4 to monitor a key switch. You can also create a zone that just has points in it that you can access through the fire alarm control panel keypad to disable. So for example, if I wanted to disable the water flow points during an annual inspection or for servicing or for some reason, I can create a zone called, we'll call it water flow disable. And in this particular zone, I can just add my water flow points. These are all inputs. There's actually no outputs in this zone. But from my fire alarm control panel keypad, I'm able to access this zone and choose to disable the inputs in that zone. Without having to access a key switch, I can disable it right from the fire alarm control panel keypad. You can do the same thing with outputs. If, for example, I wanted to create a zone for disabling all the notification in the building. So in this particular zone, I'm going to put all of my notification devices, so I'll find them over here in the list and drag them into this zone. Now these are all outputs. So now through the fire alarm control panel keypad, I can access this zone and I can just choose to disable the outputs. Again, they will all go into trouble when they are disabled, but I've disabled a group of things through the fire alarm control panel keypad. I will now demonstrate how to do that through the fire alarm control panel keypad. To disable groups of things from the fire alarm control panel keypad, access the main menu by selecting Enter, and here you will select option 2, Enable Disable. Once inside that menu, you can select to enable disable by point, so you'll need to know the address of the device you'd like to enable or disable, or you can do it by zone. If you've created a software zone in the programming software, you can then access that zone through the keypad to disable either the inputs or the outputs or both for that particular zone. So I'm going to select by zone number 2, and here I need to enter the zone number. In this case, I'm going to disable the inputs for zone number 3, so I'm just going to enter 3 to access that zone and select Enter. And now my options are to disable the inputs or to disable the outputs. I first want to disable the inputs, so I'm going to select option number 1. And now my inputs are disabled, and now I can quickly re-enable them again by selecting option 1, as you can see here. I can also quickly access to disable the outputs because I'm still in zone 3, so I'm going to disable the outputs. I've now disabled both the inputs and the outputs that are in zone 3 of the programming software. And when I escape out of here back to the main screen, all of the points that are currently in that zone will be in trouble. I can go in and re-enable them by doing the same thing by going Enter to the main menu, 2 for Enable Disable, again go by zone, and then select zone number 3. And now my options here are only to enable them because they've already been disabled. So I can re-enable the points in zone 3. And the troubles will clear from the main screen. So to recap, there are 2 options for enabling and disabling points. You can create software zones and access them via the fire alarm control panel keypad. You can also install, for example, key switches that are monitored by a contact input module that are then programmed that when active, they will disable the inputs, the outputs, or both for that particular zone that they are assigned to. For more information, please refer to the installation manual or the other recorded programming modules.